All right, guys, welcome to Accessible Tables with Adobe InDesign. My name is Dax Castro, and thank you so much for taking a little extra deep dive into this extra Adobe Max content about tables and how to deal with them with Adobe InDesign. So let's take a look at what we're going to cover here. So in this session, you're going to learn best practices for table layout. You're going to learn how to organize your tables correctly, how to deal with table footnotes, dealing with color identifiers, you know, those cells where it's red means this or blue means that, simplifying complex heading structures. And this is one of those things that I think a lot of people struggle with, is how do I make my table simpler so that I don't have to do so much remediation on the back end? Also, how to use a screen reader to test your documents, your table structure, because I think this is one of the most overlooked features of accessibility testing is when we create a document, we don't take the time to go listen to how it's going to sound inside using a screen reader, because sometimes things like dollar amounts or abbreviations, footnotes, superscripts, subscripts, all these things react differently depending upon which screen reader you're using, and some aren't even read at all. And we're going to talk about that, and you're going to get a chance to actually see a screen reader in action. All right, without further ado, let's dive right in. All right, so here we are in InDesign, and you can see I've got a table here, and this table is a pretty simple table. And we zoom in here a little bit, you can see we've got table 1.4 restaurants along highway exits, and it's listed by district here, and we've got some interstates and US 231 and fast food. And the first thing I can tell you when I'm looking at this table is it's got a little bit of a complex heading structure, right? We've got districts on the side, and it seems to be merge celled here. And then we've got the column headings for the different interstates, and then fast food up at the top. And my first question is, well, why do we have that fast food up there? I think we can do a little bit to simplify this heading structure without really changing it too much. We want to try to, anytime you have a multi-layer, a multi-level heading structure, you really want to try to simplify that as much as you can, because it's going to save you time when you're doing the remediation. It's going to help you do this quicker, because the more regular you can make your tables, the less work you have to do on the back end. So let's take a look at how we would fix that. So if we simply take the fast food and move it up into the title, then we can take that part out altogether. So now we have district on one side and then all of our interstates on the other. So how would we do that? We go back up to our table here. If you notice, this is actually one row. This up here, there we go, one row. We're going to highlight the table cell like that so that it's all highlighted. We're going to right click and hit unmerge cells. And you can see that we actually aren't in the right cell. So we're going to cut that out, paste it in there, and then we're going to take this whole thing and we're going to delete the row, right? So now we have district going down the left and our interstates going across the top there. And this signifies the amount of restaurants that are along the way, right? But we have a problem here, and this is something you would only know if you tested it using a screen reader. So the first thing we need to do is we're going to highlight this row, we're going to right click, and we're going to go to convert to heading row, to header row, because we want to make sure that this is signified and designated as the headings for the columns below it, right? So now that we've got that identified and we have our column headers all set, one thing we need to notice is that these values inside these cells in this first column just say 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And you would think that if I'm in this cell here and I want to know where I'm at, it would say I-95, District 3, 4, right? But you'd be wrong. A screen reader will not announce the double headings unless you force it to. And there is a way to do that, but it's really involved, and you'd never want to spend the time to do that if you had 100 tables in a document, or even honestly 2 or 3 tables in a document. It would take you forever. So what you have to do is you have to think about how you design that table when you're designing it, so that you think about accessibility and how it's going to be read. So we don't want it to just say I-95 3 4, because that doesn't tell us the district, that it's the district is the number 3. we want to write that in there. So if we just make a quick addition, and I've already done it here, you can see District 1, District 2, District 3. Now, when we listen to it in a screen reader, it's going to say I-95, District 2, 1, or District 3, 4. It's going to read the district because we've added it inside that data value. Now that we've made this better, the user is going to get a more robust user experience. Is this up here compliant? Sure, it's compliant, but is it a good user experience? Not so much, right? So let's take a look at our next step here. One of the things we need to note is what happens when we have a footnote, right? And here you can see that we have notes down here at the bottom, and then it says includes restaurants that offer takeout only. So what it's saying is these numbers here include restaurants that offer takeout only. So there's a superscript, right? Like a footnote. But the problem is InDesign will not export this correctly so that the footnote is an active footnote inside the table. So what happens? Well, when the screen reader gets to it, it says 31 or 31. This one will say 41. This one will say 21. It doesn't understand the superscript nature of that other value. So what do? Well, you can do a couple of different things. The first thing you can do is you can add some brackets to it. So now it's going to say 3 left bracket, 1 right bracket, right? It's not the most fluid user experience in the world, but it definitely allows the person listening to the table to understand that there is in fact a different number there. The other thing you could do is you could come in here and make it a letter, right? For A, to A. Or you could put an asterisk. You could make it, items with an asterisk, right? And one of the things that we see a lot of is the color, right? People will add a color to a cell and they'll say, you will see totals in red include restaurants that offer takeout only. So now we've got these great visual identifiers, but how does a person using a screen reader know that that cell is red? It doesn't understand. A screen reader is not going to hear or not going to announce what color the cell is unless we tell it to. And there's some ways we can do that, but it's a little bit more advanced. And we'll talk about that in a minute or two here. But in this case, we want to add a symbol. So if we add a symbol and we say items with totals with asterisk in red include restaurants offering takeout only, now we've added a secondary marker that tells the user, hey, when you hear 3 asterisk, you know that that includes restaurants who offer takeout only, right? So there's a secondary identifier because WCAG 1.4.1 says color cannot be the only means of identifying a piece of information. So you can't just use red or green or blue or any other color. There has to be some other symbology there, right? So let's take a look at, you can see here we have a much more complex example. So now we've got fast food and sit down and combination restaurants. We've got some more totals here on the side. We've even got a double subtotal across the bottom and double totals on the right hand side. This is actually, I will tell you, I've changed the parameters of the data and what the numbers and values in this to protect the innocent. But this is actually a table that was in a report that I was remediating. I've just kind of restructured it a bit. So don't think that I'm just making this up just because I'm trying to make it more complex. This is actually work that I've received not too long ago. Now, let's take a look at what we've got here. So now we have our asterisk is in here. It says it in the notes, right? Now we've got district up here and interstate down here. So our interstate is our row heading and district is our column heading. So how is that going to work out? We're going to find out when we get ready to test this with a screen reader here in a minute. All right, so what do? How do we make sense of all of this when we've got so much going on? Well, the one thing you can do is the more you can break down your heading structure, the more simple you can make your heading structure, the easier it is going to be for that screen reader to understand what's being presented in the table. The problem is that a lot of the time the data is so complex you really can't simplify it, or you've received the table at the end of the process and now it's your turn to make it accessible and without really changing the visual layout. But sometimes we can, and sometimes we can make small changes. Now here we've made a small change and we simply have broken it up into 3 different tables and allowed, now we have just a simple columns and rows with a subtotal and a total at the bottom for each one of these different sections. And then we have the totals overall in a table of its own. Now this isn't a perfect solution because a lot of times our hands are tied. We can't go in and make this change. This is why designing with accessibility in mind is so important. It's super key to make sure that you design thinking about how am I going to make this table accessible, and raise your hand and kind of let people know, hey, we gotta put on the brakes here for a second. We need to figure out how we're going to make this table pass accessibility and be readable without spending 4 hours remediating a single table, right? So let's go ahead and go out to Acrobat and test our table. So we're going to go ahead and go File, Export, and we're going to go Interactive PDF, and we're going to hit Save. Yep, we'll replace it and Export. Now, I'm going to plug in my earphones so I can hear it, and you should be able to hear it too. So we are going to turn on NVDA. Before we do that, though, let's jump back to the PowerPoint really quick because I want to talk about screen reader testing before we get into this, right? There's a couple of key things you need to know. One, the direction you move will dictate if the headings are read or ignored. The direction you use the arrow keys for will announce the heading when you're moving left and right. But when you're moving up and down in a table, it's not going to announce what the heading is for that column. It's going to assume that you know you're still in that same column. All right, so JAWS and NVDA and Apple VoiceOver are the 3 most popular screen readers, right? If you have an Apple device, you know you've got Apple VoiceOver on there already. I'm on a PC, so we're going to use NVDA and JAWS today. So they just realize that they both will interpret your tables slightly differently, and there's actually different shortcut keys you can use. JAWS is a little bit more robust. NVDA, of course, is free. JAWS is a paid subscription. You'll find JAWS is used more in the professional environment. NVDA is used more as an open source software, right? So testing your symbology. So symbology is super important. When we put these tables together, we need to go back and listen to them with a screen reader to know how it pronounces the words. Just like NA in JAWS, it's going to say NA. In NVDA, it's going to say NA, right? Depending upon what punctuation you put in there. So you need to test it and make sure that you understand what the outcome is going to sound like, right? Screen readers do not understand superscript or subscript. So remember, we talked about that. So footnotes, you either have to manually create those footnotes inside Acrobat, or you have to think about other ways to annotate out those footnotes by using different letters or different symbology. And we talked about a little bit that in the tables that we were looking at inside InDesign earlier. So screen readers assume the scope for basic tables, meaning that when your columns and rows are regular, meaning that it's a perfect grid, it's going to assume if you have a heading column that it is the scope is column, unless you tell it differently. It doesn't mean that you don't have to set the scope. It just means that if you didn't by accident, it's going to automatically assume that it is column or row, depending upon whether or not it's in the row or in the column. All right, so enough of all that. Let's look at some shortcuts here. So table, when you're in NVDA and JAWS, it's the same. You press T and it's going to bounce from table to table to table. You're going to use the Ctrl and Alt plus your arrow keys to move from cell to cell. Now, the caveat is, and you can see here actually that DQ University has a great NVDA and JAWS shortcut PDF that you can download for free. And I try to give this to everybody I can because knowing all these shortcuts by heart, it definitely takes practice, right? So JAWS has a lot of the same shortcuts, but it also has one other one that I use quite a lot, which is Ctrl Alt and the number pad 5. You have to turn off your number lock for that to activate. But basically what happens is when I press Ctrl Alt 5, it's going to tell me exactly what column and what row I'm in for that given cell. And that's something that NVDA just doesn't do. It's not part of the functionality, right? The other thing you can do is you can go into what's called table mode inside JAWS. Instead of having to hold down Control and Alt, you can press Insert Space and the letter T, and you'll hear it say table mode, and then you can just use the arrow keys to move around. We're going to get to that. All right, so I have filled your head with enough of this. Let's just dive right in. Let's turn on my NVDA here.
OK. OK button pressed. Slide. Color.
And let's
tables.pdf.
go into our table, right? And so if we listen.
District. Page 1 table. Table with 7 rows and 5 columns. Row 1 column 1 district.
So you hear that? Table with 7 rows and 5 columns. So it told us how many rows and columns there are, right? Now I am using NVDA, so I'm going to hold down Control and Alt, and I'm going to press the right arrow.
Column 2 I10.
And
column 3 I95.
See, as I move from column to
column 4 US 231.
So that said US 231. So you can tell that it didn't say us, it said US. And that's a good thing to remember. Remember, testing is super important. You want to test those unique things that could be read one way or the other to make sure you understand how it's going to be voiced when you publish the document.
Column 3, 5. Column 4, S. Column 5, I75.
Right? So column 5, I75. It doesn't say I-75. It ignores the dash altogether, the hyphen altogether. Let's move down.
Row 2, 1.
So it said row 2, 1, right? Remember, if you press the down
row 3,
arrow,
3.
It doesn't announce the column header. But if I press left,
US 231, column 4, 1.
US 231, column 4, 1. So it's going to read the column header, the row, and the value, right? So here, let's do the next one. If we go left.
I95, column 3, 4.
So I95, column 3, 4.
Running
Let's go ahead and turn off NVDA.
Cancel. Tables.
And let's open JAWS.
JAWS Home Manual, tables.pdf Adobe Acrobat Pro DC, jump list for GeForce Experience, AV page view.
All right, so now we've got a little British voice going on, right?
T.
And so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and
tables.pdf document. Page has 1 heading and no links. Tables.pdf table 1.4 restaurants along highway exits. Table with 5 columns and 7 rows district I-10 I-space.
So it said, again, it announced the table, right? So I can press insert space bar and you hear that unique sound. I'm going to do it again without talking.
Space.
See that little click? That click says I'm getting ready to listen for what mode you want me to go into. And if I press T,
table layer.
Table layer. So it tells me now I can just use my arrow keys.
I-10, column 2. I-95, column 3.
And I don't have to hold down Alt and Control if I don't want to, right? So now let's move through this table again.
1, row 2.
1, row 2. Same thing. And JAWS is going to not announce the column if I'm moving down.
4, row 3.
Just announces the row. But what if I want to know where I am in this table? If I press Ctrl Alt and the number pad 5.
Column 3, row 3, I-95, 4.
Okay, column 3, row 3, I-95, 4. Let's listen to it again.
Column 3, row 3, I-95, 4.
Right, so it didn't say district 3, 4, right?
I-10, 1, column 2. I-95, 4, column 3, US 231, 1, column 4. 4, row 4.
So did you hear it? It said 4, this 4.
Table, column 1, row 4.
Row 4. So see how it's announcing the column header, but it's not announcing the row header? Want to know why that is? Let's take a look, right? So if we go into our tags, and the way we do that, if you don't see tags here, right-click and go down here to tags and turn that on.
Leaving menus.
Now I'm going to go up here to find tag from selection. So if we look in here, we can see that there is, in fact, a column header, but there's not any row heading. So there's nothing telling JAWS or NVDA, hey, I've got a row header and I want you to tell us what it is. So that's why having scope is so important, right? So we're going to right click on there and go to cell properties and make sure this is heading cell and the scope of row. All right. Oop, I got more than I wanted to. Just these guys. Scope of row. And then this is all data cells. There we go. So now we have district. That should be a column header. And all these guys are column headers. And these guys, let's double check, are row headers. So now we're set correctly. So let's go ahead and save this out. Another thing to note is if you're changing the tag structure to your document while you're using a screen reader and you try to go back without turning off and on and reloading the screen reader, it's not going to pick up the changes you made. You're going to go, wait a minute, I changed this. I know I changed it, and it's still not going to sound any different. So make sure that you close out JAWS or NVDA and open them back up once you've saved your document. So now let's go back and open up JAWS.
JAWS Home Manual, tables.pdf document. Page has one heading and no links. Tables.pdf table 1.4 restaurants along highway exits, space.
All right, so now that we're back on our table, let's see if we've made the right changes, right? So let's go back into table mode, insert space.
Table layer.
Table layer.
I-10, column 2. I-95, column 3, 2, 1, row 2.
So did you hear what that said? 2, 1, row 2.
3, 4, row 3.
3, 4, row 3. So it's reading 3, 4, row 3. It's a little confusing, right? So what if I ask it to tell me where I am?
Column 3, row 3, I-95, 3, 4.
So it said I-95, 3, 4. So do you see why having district there is so important? So let's move to this other table, our second table here, and let's go in and quickly set our scope because we could not set the scope.
C, highlight text, N, create tag from selection, R, find ... F, create tag from leaving menus, tree view table, level 5, less table greater, closed, context menu.
So we're going to go into here and go back into our table editor. And we're going to hold down Shift and select all of these, or you can drag a box that touches each one that you want to select. Right click, cell properties, and set this to row. And then we're going to set our heading. This should be set to column. Right? So now that we've saved this out, and let's go ahead and close our PDF and
menu,
open it back.
File menu, leaving menus, AV left container view, open dialog, file name : edit combo, tables.pdf. To set the value, use the arrow keys or type the value, Alt+N, tables.pdf - Adobe Acrobat Pro DC.
All right, so we're in our table. Let's take a look, listen again to how it's different this time, right? So if we go down.
I-95, US 200, District 1, 1, row 2.
So District 1, 1, row 2. So it read the row header and then the
I-75, 2, column 5.
Now, because I moved to the right, it didn't announce District 1 again because it assumes that I remember, hey, you're still in District 1. But if I go down, I should hear
District 2, 1, row 3.
District 2, 1, row 3, right? Now, if I want to know what column I'm in, I need a reminder. I press Ctrl Alt and the number pad 5.
Column 5, row 3, I-75, District 2, 1.
See there, it read I-75, District 2, 1. Now, you can hear that it said I-75, whereas NVDA just ignored it, right?
District I-75, row 1, US 231, I-95, column 3.
So this is one of those differences where NVDA might ignore the hyphen or call it a dash or a hyphen, and JAWS is going to announce it. So understanding those parameters lets you realize kind of what the user experience is going to be like. It'll help you make those decisions on how to format your text.
District 4,
so
2, row 5.
That once we have the row headings and the column headings set, we get all the information. We get everything we want to get.
Column 3, row 5, I-95 District 4, 2.
Right? So you can hear that it said I-95 District 4, 2. And then it told you, of course, what column and row you were in. So that gives you all the information you need. That's why setting scope is so important, because it gives those values. Without it, it's just simply telling you the data. And it's really hard to understand where you are inside the table. How many times did I press left? What row am I in? Is this a column header? All of that really makes a whole big difference. It makes a big difference when you're trying to listen to and understand complex tables, right? Now, being able to identify what cell I'm in, announcing the column and the row, isn't possible in NVDA, but it is possible in JAWS. And in NVDA, you would just use the arrow keys, and you would be able to identify using context clues where you are in the table. All right, so let's go take a look at our superscript and subscript, right?
Table, column 1, row 1, table with 5 columns and 8 rows. Column.
Let's go ahead, first of all, and set our scope, because we did not set scope for this table. So what I'm doing is I'm finding a piece of text close to the table so I can find it in the tags tree easily. So I highlight that text, find tag from selection. I know the next object is that in that table. So I drill in here, and I'm going to right click and go to Table Editor. And then I'm going to highlight over the rows that I want to make. So I'm going to right click and go to Cell Properties, change this to Heading Cell, and change this Scope to Row. All right, and let's just double check these guys and make sure they're correct. Highlight them all, Cell Properties, and set the scope to column. All right, so now this should be set, right? So we're going to save our document. I'll show you what I mean when I say that JAWS isn't going to announce this correctly, right? We have our scope and columns, scope set for both our columns and our rows.
Table with 5 columns and 8 rows. Column 1, row 1, I-10, column 2, row 2.
See?
I-10, 2, row 2.
2, row 2. It should say District 1, but it didn't, because it doesn't understand that we made a change to that tags tree. It only loads the tags tree when it loads the document. So let's go ahead and close this document out.
Context menu, file menu. To navigate, press up or down arrow. O, menu bar. Tables.pdf-Adobe Acrobat Pro DC. Table, column 1, row 1, table with 5 columns and 8 rows. Column 1, row 1.
All right, so let's go to our table. Now we're back at our table again. And let's go
column
ahead.
District 1, District 2, 3 1, row 3.
So did you hear that? District 2, 3 1, row 3. Let's hear it again. Let's ask it, where am I completely? So that's Ctrl Alt, the number pad 5.
Column 2, row 3, I-10 District 2, 3 1.
I-10 District 2, 3 1. So how would you know that that data is not 31 or 3 superscript 1? You wouldn't know. It doesn't tell you that that's a superscript. So that's why it's so important that we have some other identifying marker. And so that's why if we go to the next
table with 5 columns and 8 rows, column 1, row 1, district.
Right? We can see in this table, now this one has some of all of the different types of changes that we made.
I-10, 2, 3 star, row 3.
3 star. So it says 3 star, right? And instead of asterisk. Now NVDA will say asterisk.
US2 I-75 3 4 5 6 left bracket 1 right bracket, row 7.
So there it says 6 left bracket 1 right bracket. That tells the user, hey, that's probably a footnote. And if you use the same methodology throughout your document, people are going to come to expect that that's what that means.
US 231 2A, column 4.
Right? So 2A. So there we could use the letter A. Items with the letter A include restaurants that offer takeout only, right? So this gives you a bunch of different options to which one you want to use.
Page down, 2.
All right, so here we have our red cells, right? Now, if you wanted to absolutely make sure or tell a screen reader that that cell is red, because it was important for them to understand that it is red, then you could, in essence, give this actual text. So I could say, I can highlight this number 3, find it in
Context
my
menu.
tags tree,
To navigate, press up or down. Leaving menus. Tree view 3.
and I can right-click on here and go to Properties,
Properties P.
and I can tell it actual text.
Actual text colon type in text. Alt plus I.
So we could say
red cell space 3.
Right? We wouldn't want to say red cell with the value of 3. Just say red cell 3, right? And if you wanted to give a pause there,
3. Period.
Remember, periods
Period
are
space.
long pauses.
Period space.
And commas are short pauses. So this would say red cell 3, right? It'll give you a pause. So if we hit close,
Tables.pdf.
right now imagine having to do this for 100 different cells within a table. It would be crazy, right? So that's why you implement the other methodologies early on. All right, so let's go ahead and do the same thing for this one. So that's going to be in this next cell. That's 1. Let's go ahead and find this guy. Find tag from selection. There he is.
To navigate, press up or down arrow. N. Actual text code type E D C 4 L 4. Caps lock on. Caps lock off. Alternate text colon edit. Tables.pdf Adobe Acrobat Pro DC. Level 10. Context menu. To navigate, press up or down arrow. N.
So the one thing you want to remember too is that you want to make sure that you tab to the next cell before you hit close, because if you're still in that cell and you hit close, it might not save that value for you. It's definitely something, once you've done it a couple of times, you remember to hit tab.
Close button. To activate, press.
So now we're going to save the document out.
Tree view. To move through or
We're going to close the document again.
Context menu. File menu.
Open
to navigate,
it back
press up or down arrow. O.
So that
Explorer
JAWS will
folder layout
reinterpret
Shelf
the
folder
document.
view. Items view multi-select list box. Tables.pdf. Tables.pdf document.
All right, so it cycled back to the top.
Page down. 5.
So we're going to hit T.
Table. Column 1.
T.
Table with 5 columns and 8 rows.
T
Table with 5
again.
columns and 8 rows. Table with 5 columns
There
and 8
we
rows.
go. Now
Column
we're
1,
at our
row
correct
1,
table.
District.
Now let's see what happens when we go to that cell.
I-10. Column 2. Row 2. Red cell 3. Row 3.
So did you hear it? Red cell 3, row 3, right? So we did in fact tell it to say red cell 3, right? So
1. Row 4. I-9. US 200. Red cell 4. Row 5.
red cell 4, row 5, right?
Column 4. Row 5. US 231. Red cell 4.
Right? So
Column 4. Row 5. US 231. Red cell 4.
right? It didn't say district because in this table we haven't set the district labels as row headings yet. But here's the trick. We did all this to say red cell, right? But we know that WCAG says color cannot be the only means of communicating information. So just because we satisfied this for a screen reader doesn't make this a compliant solution, because we're still using color only as a means of communicating information. So for people who are colorblind, or people who, for people who are colorblind, you can't rely on color to communicate that info. So that's where we have to go back.
Page down. Sit dash
use
down. Space.
Symbology, right? So this is where we have this crazy complex table. Now you can see here, and you might be going, oh, wait, we can't use color. Why is fast food this color, and sit down is that color, and combination is that color, right? Well, you're right. Those are uses of color, but they are also identified using the column header that they're in. So all of the columns in underneath fast food will read fast food, and those in sit down will read sit down. And so in this instance, it's really more a decorative item than it is a function. It's not the only way you would know that sit down is golden, right? So let's listen to our cells here. Now we haven't done anything to this table yet, so let's get in here.
Table with 16 columns and 12 rows. Column 1. Row 1. Table 1.4 food options along Florida highways. Spans 16 columns.
All right.
District. Fast food. Sit dash down. I dash blank. Row 4. 6. Row 5. Table 1.4 food options along Florida highways. 3-star. Column 2.
So 3-star, column 2, right? Now here is a point that you might, it's something to definitely discuss. If I'm going to use symbology inside my tables, in the first instance, or maybe in every instance, it depends on what you'd like to do, you should probably tell the user what that asterisk is for, rather than waiting till after the table in order to tell them that the totals with asterisks in red include restaurants offering takeout only. But maybe you don't want to include that up here underneath table 1.4 food options. You want to keep it looking this way, but you want to be able to tell people with a screen using screen readers, hey, get ready, because things with asterisks, they're going to come, you're going to hear them, and that means that it's restaurants that are offer takeout. So what do? You move the tag up above the table. So it doesn't change the layout, but it changes the tag order. Now, this is an approach. It's not the only way to do it. After a user goes through one or two tables and they hear the note section and it's always the same, they're going to understand that they're going to expect it, right? But if you're trying to give them that Cadillac experience, that really kind of, hey, I really thought about you and how you're going to use this table, this is one method to doing it. So I'm going to find this item here.
Context menu. Leaving menus. Preview. Level 5.
So this is my notes.
1. Totals with asterisk in red include restaurants off ... Level
Right?
4, less. Level 5. Less. Level 6. Notes colon.
So I might move
Level 4,
both
less
of
view return
these
open.
above my table, right? So I know my table is going to be
Less
right
rate
here,
closed.
right?
Level 4. Less peak. Level 5. Less table.
Now, what do we notice here? Everything is inside the table. This happens an awful lot to people. They use a table as a means of laying out all of the different things. They put the title in row 1, they put the footer and the footnotes in row, whatever the ending row is. This is what happens, right? So let's take a look at
Level
what's in
6.
here. And you
Level
can
7, less
see
geog rate. Level 8.
that in this first
Level 9,
row, we in fact have the table heading, right? So this is a little bit of advanced PDF remediation here, but we're going to take this paragraph and we're going to drag it up
Less peak greater. Open.
inside our section.
Level 4.
So now
less
it's
peak greater.
outside the table. And then we have our table body. We go down here and there's our notes, and we're going to do the exact same thing to the notes, right? Now remember, we don't want to drag this to the bottom. If we were fixing it, we would drag it to the bottom, but we're going to go ahead and drag this all the way back up here right after our title. So now we have food title, right? Then we have our notes section, and now we have our table. Now we can go ahead and delete this table row because this text here was inside that table, right? So we can delete that. And we can delete this bottom row because that's where the notes were, right? So now if we highlight our table, we can see that it is just the items inside the actual table. Now remember, it's not going to know the changes that we made until we save and reopen the document. Save the document, close it out. Open it back up.
Table with 16 columns and 11 rows. Column 1, row 1, district, cell 1 of rows spanning 2 rows.
All right, so we're back in our table. We've opened that document back up, and now let's go ahead and go
Table
back
with
up
1,
to our
totals with a notes. Table 1.4 food options along Florida Highway.
So there's our table title. If we hit the down arrow,
Notes colon. 1, totals with asterisk in red include restaurants offering take dash out only.
right? So it tells you what the note is before you start going through the table without changing the visual layout, right?
Table with 16 columns and 11 rows.
Now, as I walk
Table
through
with
this
16 column
table,
district, fast food, combo total district,
and
I dash 9, I dash US 200 and blank, 6, fast food district, 3 star, column 2.
I hear 3-star, right? I might change my, at that point, I might go in and change my notes text to say totals with star in red include restaurants offering takeout only, right? So this is why testing is so important, because you catch all these little things that you're not going to catch just by looking at tags trees and making sure your tags are in the right order. Screen reader testing is super important. Now, once you get familiar with it, I know we're spending quite a bit of time on it here, but once you get familiar with it, you're going to be able to do this much faster. You're going to spot check a few places, check a few things in a few tables, and call it good, right? Because you're going to develop those best practices for creating tables that are going to be read by a screen reader much easier, right? You're going to pass those on to your teammates. They're still going to give you back the tables that have things that you need to fix, but at least you're much farther along in the process, and it's going to help you create more accessible tables. All right, guys, so I hope that you have taken some of what you've learned in this session that will help you spark some different ideas of how to handle your tables differently. This is definitely not, we could spend all day long on tables, just going over best practices, looking at different table structures, how to fix them, what to do, and how to handle all the different complex situations that tables can arise. But hopefully, the topics we've covered in this session will help you farther along in your journey to making more accessible content. My name is Dax Castro. Thank you so much for being with me on this journey for accessibility. This has been Accessible Tables with Adobe InDesign. And if you want to catch me on social media, you can check me out on Facebook or YouTube, PDF Accessibility. We've got a great Facebook group with about 400 members and a YouTube channel where I post content that deals with accessibility, or you can find me on LinkedIn. Thank you guys so much, and we'll see you in the next video.